Hey, it's us again. It's Friday, and it's time for another movie retrospective. Going back to the 70s yet again, doing a vampire movie. We don't do a lot of those. Actually, doing the 1979 Werner Herzog adaptation of Nosferatu.
Yeah, Klaus Kinski.
Which is kind of like an adaptation of Dracula,
yeah.
too. But the interesting thing about this, Werner Herzog didn't usually do remakes. I believe this was the only one he did. But for whatever reason, he had a lot of affection for the original Nosferatu, which was directed by F.W. Murnau, of course, and came out in 1922.
Yeah, and if you guys don't know, Nosferatu was an unlicensed copy of Dracula.
Right.
And it was illegal, so they ordered it destroyed.
Yeah.
But a few copies existed, and that's the Nosferatu you know. That was something that escaped that destruction that was ordered by the court.
Yeah, because actually Bram Stoker was dead by the time that came out, but his widow was still alive, and her name was Florence. And she, when they made Nosferatu, when Murnau made Nosferatu, he's like, well, we can use, like, the Dracula story, but we'll just change everybody's names and change a couple things, and no one will be the wiser.
Yeah, because it wasn't in public domain yet.
Except nobody fell for it.
They didn't fall for that shit.
So they got sued, and, like, they did order, all the copies destroyed, but luckily that didn't happen, because that's actually, a classic of silent cinema.
Yeah, so this is like a reboot or a remake of the banned copy.
Right.
That'd be a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Of the counterfeit Dracula.
Yeah.
And it had its own qualities. I'll tell you what, the vampire from Nosferatu had an awesome look.
Yeah.
It looked good. And so,
More like described in the book. I feel like because the Bela Lugosi one was so iconic, I think a lot of people, it seemed like a lot of vampire movies, subsequent to that, were like, oh, Dracula, he's like a foxy aristocrat type dude.
Yeah.
But in the book, they actually described him much as he looked in the original Nosferatu when he was Count Orlok, and much like Dracula looks in Werner Herzog's version, which came out in 1979. He looked like a rat man, like a rat person.
Yeah, and that lines up more with Eastern European vampire traditions. These weren't sex symbols. They were something that crawled out of a crypt.
Yeah, they were
nasty.
yucky and smelly, and they had and this one too, the one that Werner Herzog made, he really does make. He plays a lot on the plague theme.
Yeah.
There's 11,000 rats in this movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he really plays on that. Here comes the plague on our shores, and it's and him as a living plague type of thing. And they made him look very rat-like because of that.
And that was one of the reasons why I liked Salem's Lot, because in Salem's Lot they used the Nosferatu style vampire.
Yeah.
It's a damn monster.
Yeah.
And Klaus does a really good job in this movie because he's not some kind of verbose, aristocratic, nobleman, when he speaks. In this, he's just a pitiful, nasty little sucker,
Yeah.
And, go with the plague, the rats will follow. Just stuff like that. He's just nasty.
And he's like super creepy, and he's like
pitiful.
He's pitiful.
Yeah.
He's sort of sympathetic because he has a conversation with Harker kind of early on in the film about the burden of immortality, so of not being able to die.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, they made him a slightly more sympathetic. He's still not that sympathetic. I mean, obviously he's still a monster.
Well, he's in suffering.
But they make him more of like a suffering character. Which, like I said, that's kind of a...
But he's cursed, and he's a nasty little fucker.
Right, yeah. So, the interesting thing about this, and I feel like this is something that I find really, really interesting, because I read, Bram Stoker's novel, as most people have, I assume. I'm always interested in how they change shit up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, Nosferatu, obviously they had to change some details about it so they didn't get sued, even though that didn't work. What Werner Herzog did, he sort of took the book and the original Nosferatu, and then, he combined those two things, but then he kind of, went off on his own direction. The setup of the story is pretty much the same. It's like Jonathan Harker is going to Transylvania. You know, Count Dracula's going to buy some land, and he's a, you know, a real estate guy, solicitor, whatever, and he has to go there, and he gets trapped in the castle and whatnot. Now, the interesting thing, and this happened in the original Nosferatu too, in the 1922 one was actually set, I believe, in Wismar, Germany, or Bremen. This one is also supposed to be set in Wismar, Germany, because the original one was, except the town officials of Wismar would not let Werner Herzog shoot there. So actually most of the stuff that's supposed to be Germany is actually Delft in the Netherlands. And all the stuff at Dracula's castle, that is an actual castle, and it's in Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, the look of the movie's really good.
It's a beautiful, beautiful movie.
Especially for such a low-budget movie.
Yeah.
I don't think they spent much money on this.
1.4 million.
Yeah, not much. And maybe that was actually not too bad for the 70s, though. But, but especially for a European production, you know. But it was just kind of a cheap movie, but it didn't really matter because it was executed pretty well. And everything's different. Like, you know, when Dracula or Nosferatu arrives at the port, it's not at night in some scary port or anything. It's broad daylight.
Yeah, and he just kind of rolls on up and
so it kind of everything
in
looks,
the canal.
Things don't look epic; they look kind of mundane and realistic.
That's what it would really look like.
Like it would really look like that, you know. So that was one thing I kind of give the movie credit for. It's not overreaching or overplaying things and being theatrical. Kind of downplaying a lot of stuff.
Yeah, almost the opposite.
Yeah.
Like I said, it, you know, obviously Klaus Kinski as Count Dracula looks really creepy and really otherworldly.
Yeah.
Like he comes off very, very alien.
Looks like a little albino rat.
I mean, it's Klaus Kinski. He's an insane person.
And and what's great is
famously,
like that scene where he asks how far away it is, this property that he bought, and the guy says, well, you know, what do you say? It took me a month.
4 weeks, yeah.
4 weeks by horse, and he just went, oh, that's far. You know, like
he said on land it's far, so he's like, I'm taking a ship. That's
right, yeah. And it's just kind of funny because you never see any depictions of a vampire kind of being frightened by the distance. That was kind of a good touch. Like, oh, that's kind of problematic when you're a vampire. Yeah. Basically, that's what he's thinking.
And, you know, probably he hasn't left his castle in
he hasn't left home in a long time. And, this is a big journey. Yeah.
He was just, I'm assuming that he's like, well, the thing about it is that, you know, obviously in the original novel, Dracula was like, I guess he was like running out of peasants, like about around where he lives. So he said, I'm going to move to London. So there's like millions and millions of people that I can eat. Yeah. This one kind of went in the same direction as kind of the later, like the Francis Ford Coppola one and stuff like that, where he becomes obsessed with Lucy. Now, here's the thing that I was going to say about how I'm interested in how they change shit up all the time. And interestingly, 1979, there was a lot of vampire or Dracula adaptations that came out that year and afterward, because that was the year that it went into the public domain. So you could do it without having to pay anybody. Because also 1979, they had that one, I think John Badham directed it. Frank Langella played the Count. And weirdly, they did the same thing that this movie did. They switched the characters of Lucy and Mina. For, I don't know why. It didn't like make it. And also, I think they made Van Helsing Mina's dad or something like that. Yeah. But this one, what they did, Lucy is the main character, like the main woman, and that's Jonathan's wife. Mina is in it, but she's in it for like maybe 2 seconds. She's like in one scene, like as Lucy's friend or something like that. So she is not the main character. She does not feature in it. Van Helsing is also a very, very minor role.
Yeah.
He basically just shows up as like, yeah, it's a vampire and we can't do anything about it. Or I don't even believe it's a vampire, whatever.
And he's not given kind of like a heroic final scenes where he defeats Dracula. It doesn't really go down like that. Matter of fact, the way Dracula is destroyed in this, is very different. Actually, the way Nosferatu is destroyed is very different from what you see the Bela Lugosi Dracula, how he went down. It's a totally different story.
Yeah, it really goes in a different direction. And like I said, the character of Lucy, who is played by Isabelle Adjani, the French actress, and who is actually was a perfect choice for this, because the way that her character is, because her character is supposed to be like purity personified, because she's like the only one that can defeat the monster and all this other stuff. So Isabelle Adjani You know, if you've ever seen her in any other movie, she was in The Tenant, she was in Possession, I believe. She's like so beautiful that she doesn't look like a real person. She's like she's very ethereal looking. And they made her look particularly ethereal in this movie. She's very pale. She looks like, she's got those big eyes and she has like that really dark hair. And she just looks like perfect and like porcelain.
That's the girl from The Tenant.
She was in The Tenant, yeah.
She's with the big 70s glasses.
Yeah, she looked more normal in that. But in this, she looks
she was really good looking in that, almost too good looking.
That's what I mean.
Like
she's like eerily beautiful.
Something about her profile, the way the nose and the upper lip, the way it meets on her. She's got a nose-mouth arrangement that just kind of a nose-mouth arrangement that's very conducive to the eye, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I've always thought she was like one of the most beautiful women that's ever lived.
Yeah, it's not her eyes though. I don't think. I think it's her nose and her mouth. There's something about the way that sits on her skull. When you see her, you'll see what I'm talking about.
But she really so what they do with this, like I said, the beginning of it is very similar to the novel and very similar to other Dracula adaptations where Harker goes, there's the thing with Renfield and he's like gone crazy and they put him in an asylum and he just laughs all the time and tries to eat flies and whatnot.
Yeah.
Harker goes there, Dracula feeds on him. No three weird sisters in this, the vampire ladies were not in this. Harker is in the castle. And he's basically a prisoner in the castle. Dracula's kind of like snacking on him and stuff.
Yeah.
And then, Dracula is like, oh, there's Lucy, and that's the property that I'm buying is right down the street from her, so I'm gonna go get that. So he just basically leaves Jonathan in there in a drained state, and he takes off in the middle of the night with all his coffins. And like I said, and he rolls up in what's supposed to be Wismar, Germany, but is actually Delft, and kind of rolls in with all his coffins and his rats and everything that.
Yeah, don't spoil too much of the movie.
I won't. Like I said, the ending is very, very different. So I'm just warning you right now, it doesn't end the same way.
The strong side of the movie is this. You see this movie to see Klaus Kinski do Nosferatu. His version of a vampire is quite good. I like it. It's very different.
That dude was like born to play that part.
Yeah, quite good. I would say probably the weak part of the movie is that I thought it had kind of a humdrum or subpar Renfield. Although I'm saying this because it's really hard to beat Tom Waits' Renfield.
He was so good.
Tom Waits was Renfield. When you think of Renfield,
the perfect casting.
Tom Waits is Renfield. Yeah. Really. So.
Yeah, this guy Renfield's only in probably like 3 scenes.
Yeah, and he's just kind of like I didn't really care for it.
And it should be noted that guy is not an actor. He's actually a writer. He's a writer.
I was going to say that I thought he was something out of maybe like low budget community theater.
Yeah,
Tom Waits nailed it.
He really did.
He nailed that role. I mean, all Renfields should be compared to Tom Waits.
Yeah, and there's like the Coppola Dracula had like a lot of things I didn't like about it, like in casting issues, presumably, mostly. Jeez. You guys know what I'm talking about. But
the accents were terrible.
Yeah, it's like get British people or don't. Yeah. Don't get American people that are trying to do
Winona
British
was
accents.
miscast, so was
and I love Winona Ryder.
Reeves, just that's not their.
I love Keanu Reeves
they're
too.
That was not their movie.
It was just kind of like if you guys saw Dangerous Liaisons, the one with Glenn Close in it. They put Keanu Reeves in that too, and he was just as out of place. Mm-hmm. You can tell
he's from California.
Right. It's like you can tell he's from California. And ding on him, he's a good actor. Like I've seen him in other movies, but they just insisted for whatever reason, for some period.
Box office.
They kept putting him in these movies where he just really did not belong. Yeah. That's just not in his wheelhouse.
Right.
He's not good at playing aristocrats. He's not good at playing period pieces. You know what I mean? But it's like, put him in an action movie, put him in like a teen comedy, put him in something like that. He's great. But,
sci-fi.
Like I said, it's no ding on him. It's just people have specialties, and that's not his. But yeah. So yeah, the Renfield in this was kind of like I said. He's not an actor. He just basically giggled all the time, which some people liked. I guess, like according to the reviews I read.
How can you top Tom Waits though?
But you can't.
That the way he delivered that character is just slam dunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing about this one though, it's like I'm not even sure that I would call Werner Herzog's Nosferatu a horror movie. it's almost kind of like, I don't know what I would call it exactly. It's like, yes, it's based on Dracula. Yes, it has horrific elements, but so much of it is about the visuals of it. I mean, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. It's just it's very ponderous. It's almost like, I've seen it compared to like a poem, like about suffering and about plague and about things like that. And it does really have that impression to it. It's like, it's very languid. But it works though, really. And it actually, when it came out, it actually got really, really good reviews, and it still gets good reviews today. I mean, I think I looked on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, and it's got like 94% or something. So it's something that,
I'll tell you what though, it did not really have a lot of the Dracula tropes that you see over and over.
Yeah.
It is its own thing.
Yeah, and like I said, it's probably the most different adaptation of Dracula that I've seen, in the sense that, you know what I mean? When you see like the Frank Langella one, they switched the characters, and they did this and that, and a lot of them leave out a lot of characters. Like a lot of them will leave out like Quincy Morris, for example, and shit like that. But this one kind of just went in a completely different direction, and the ending is completely different.
Yeah.
And it's not kind of like, oh, we're gonna all team up and kill this thing that's come into the town. It doesn't really go down that way. It's almost more like a, I don't know what I'd call it.
Here's another angle I'd like to come at it this way. Don't expect a modern, really fast-paced movie. Expect a movie of the 70s trying to deliver you what a silent movie delivered. It's, what I'm talking about? That it has kind of has the tempo of a silent movie, but it's not silent.
It really does.
But it's like that, and that's because that's what the source material was.
Yeah.
So it's not. Do not expect a modern Dracula movie like Bela Lugosi's. No, not really. Matter of fact, the source material, the book is, the Bram Stoker book is not modern. The way it's written is kind of ponderous. So this movie does kind of call back to that. It is along that line. It's not a modern movie.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't even know if I'd call it a horror movie. It's a gothic movie for sure. But I don't think I'd call it a horror movie. But yeah, the interesting thing, and like I said, Werner Herzog did not make remakes because he liked to do his own movies. But this was he thought this was the best German language film ever made, and he wanted to pay homage to it. Now, some of the shots in his version are exactly the same shots as were in Murnau's version, but he specifically said he wanted to take it in a new direction. He said, I always wanted to bridge, the Germanic film from back then, the German expressionist kind of movement, with the modern era, what was at the time the modern era. And then he's like, then I felt I could go on into the future with whatever films I wanted to make, because I had bridged this gap in German filmmaking.
It's a good looking film. When I saw it, I thought it was 80s. And she told me, no, this is 1979 production, but I thought it was more like 85.
Yeah.
It looked good.
Interesting thing, too, is that when they filmed this, I mean, in the United States, and we saw it on Shudder, you're going to see the English language version. What they did was they filmed two versions of it simultaneously. They filmed one where everyone was speaking English, and they filmed one where everyone was speaking German. Now, Werner Herzog, obviously, he's German, so he prefers the German language version. He thinks it's more authentic. I'm not real sure how different it is. Like, all the shots are pretty much identical. Like I said, they filmed them at the same time. They would just film one scene in English, and then they would film the same scene again in German. So, I don't know how much difference there is between the two. I've never seen the German language version. Evidently, if you get the Blu-ray, it has both versions on it.
Yeah, that'd be good, actually.
But yeah, I'm actually curious to see the German language version, just to see how much difference there is, because,
In my opinion, you see this movie to see Klaus Kinski's interpretation of what a Nosferatu, what he was like.
Yeah, he pretty
much nails it. He's a creepy, old man, kind of afraid to leave the house.
Yeah.
Creepy.
And dude, just some of the shots of him, like the whole screen is black, but then just his face like little in the middle of the screen. It's like so creepy.
And he's got this curse that he can't really manage, and he can't die, and he's got this bloodthirst, and he's fucking miserable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he definitely comes
and
across
he's
like
a living ghost, really. When you see him, he's not like a living man. He's like a ghost.
Yeah, just
really.
the physicality of how he plays it is really, really good. Like, I loved the scene where, after the
standing there just staring at you.
Yeah, well, I love the scene, like, when the ship rolled up in the canal, like, he didn't get out in the day, obviously, because he's a vampire, but, like, after everybody had gone to bed, and he's, like, creeping out of the thing with his coffin under his arm and shit like that, with the shadows and shit like that.
Yeah,
it's
and he's like
really,
centuries
really cool.
old, and he just says some like mundane little comments and stuff from now and then. You're just like, he's just fucking creepy.
Yeah,
he's really
he's
creepy.
super, super creepy.
Yeah,
if you are
like a parasite.
Yeah, and actually, if you're interested in Nosferatu and in the original Nosferatu, if you haven't seen it, I recommend watching Shadow of the Vampire, which is sort of a fictionalized account of the making of F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu in 1922, and it's really, really funny. Like the whole, it's kind of a black comedy, but not quite. The whole premise of it is that Max Schreck, who played Count Orlok in the original Nosferatu, was for real a vampire. And like that's how hardcore Murnau was. He's like, I went out and found an actual fucking vampire to put in my movie just for, verisimilitude. So but yeah, it's actually a really good movie. It was on Netflix or Shudder for a while. I don't know if it's still on there anymore, but if you haven't seen it, I would recommend that too if you're interested in Dracula adaptations. So I guess that'll do it for our discussion of 1979's Nosferatu, directed by Werner Herzog. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember, if you like the show, to like, share, subscribe on all your social media. Share with all your friends and family. If you'd like to financially support the show, you can go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or you can go to our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a link in the sidebar to a PayPal account if you'd like to give a one-time donation. Remember, our regular episodes of 13 O'Clock come out every Tuesday. These movie retrospectives right here come out every Friday. And we also have 13 O'Clock Matinee, which is 3 new movies in the theater. That comes out on Sunday. So we will see you next time. Bye.